Hello and welcome to All Chalk, a podcast about the power of education to help young people speak up and build a fairer world. My name's Greg, I'm founder of Smart School Councils, and this is our very first episode, so thank you so much for checking it out. And before I tell you a little bit about today's guest, I just want to explain kind of where this podcast idea came from. Our charity, Smart School Councils, holds a very simple idea at its heart, that in a democracy, everybody's voice is important, and that schools just have this great position to give all young people a positive and inclusive first introduction to that. And in my view, that opportunity is often missed. We often create systems in our school which actually put off people from politics or democracy, and we want to change that. So we built this new approach to a school council, which I'll share much more about at the end. It's used by 600 schools across the country, around 250,000 users or young voices heard as part of it. And along the way, since we started kind of 8 or 9 years ago, we've met so many amazing kind of students, teachers, educators, members of staff who believe this too. And this podcast arose, I guess, just to share their stories, to put them front and centre about the work they're doing to build a positive and inclusive democracy. So if you're a teacher, I guess you're going to get loads of ideas on how to do this in your school, build a better school council, make it more inclusive. But if you don't work in education, you're just going to hear from some amazing teachers and educators who work so hard in giving young people the best start in life. So thanks for being here. Today's guest is Rachel Gray, who's an amazing teacher at Kells Lane Primary School in Gateshead in the northeast of England. 3 things I love about her chat. The explanation and belief on getting some of the youngest children involved in this, in democracy. She's like, why wouldn't we do this? Why wouldn't we do this? It's such a great message. Secondly, how self-managing she's been able to get the young people to be, even from a very young age. And also that kind of reminder that young people, children, are citizens now. They're not waiting for some kind of switch that goes off when they're 18, when they suddenly become part of this world. Of course, they're part of it now. It's a really good reminder from Rachel, so I really love chatting to her. Thank you so much for listening. Over to the podcast now. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us and for inviting us on. Really excited.
That's okay. How are you? We've been fighting against our first technical hitches today.
Yeah, now we're all on the Wi-Fi. It's all good. So we've just jumped on the mobile instead.
Okay, yeah, I guess Victorian schools and Wi-Fi don't always mix, but brilliant. Thanks so much for coming on. Do you want to tell us a little bit about you and your school? I'm just keen to hear a bit more about the context.
Yeah, so our school is a primary school. We have a nursery as well. It's a 2-form entry, and we're kind of like sit in the centre of kind of a quite built up area in Gateshead. So I've been working at the school for about 5 or 6 years now. Now I was in early years for quite a long time. I work in Key Stage 2, and I also have a lovely role which is character development lead. And that kind of is how I got involved with Smart School Council, really.
Fabulous. And you're in the northeast. You're in Gateshead. Amazing area, because I was born in the northeast, so I'm glad to hear a northeast accent on the podcast. I'm always curious about your role into education. So, like, did you know you always wanted to be a teacher?
So when I was a kid, I literally always wanted to be a teacher or a vet. Growing up, that was literally my whole thing. And then I actually went down the maths route with university and realised quite quickly that I didn't want to do secondary. Transferred across to primary, and specifically like early years specialism. So I've been in early years sort of majority of my career, and then just working with the wider school. I've got a great head teacher, and she kind of said, open your horizons up a little bit. So that's where I jumped into Key Stage 2. So I've been working Key Stage 2 about 3 years now.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what was it about the secondary route that made you think, oh, maybe this isn't for me?
I mean, to be honest, I'm really passionate about maths, but I just find that children sadly either love it or they hate it. So it's really difficult. And I think that starts in early years, that your first kind of experiences stay with you. So I used to, in previous settings, I used to do parent workshops to try and undo the damage that had been done a little bit.
Yeah.
Because sadly, I do think that maths is just a tricky thing. As I said, you need a bit of passion to enjoy it. So my thinking was, well, I could start at the bottom and the foundation, hopefully change some ideas that they have about math. And then it just, I loved early years. So I never thought I'd leave. But obviously Key Stage 2, I love Key Stage 2. So what can you do?
Yeah, there's sort of a weight around maths as a subject, isn't there, for some people and for young people, and a sort of pressure that might not always be a positive thing, I guess. But anyway, moving on, what do you find most exciting and challenging about your job? I'm always curious to hear what teachers have to say on this.
I think probably the most exciting thing is just that no 2 days are the same. And I feel like, it is hard work. It's always going to be. And I think it is a vocation. But at the end of the day, the exciting thing is you're shaping the future, aren't you? You've got that opportunity. And I don't think a lot of people realise when they first go into teaching, like, what a great responsibility that is. But, you can make change. Probably the most challenging is just everything that's, without getting political, everything that's going on with funding and, sometimes it would be nice to just get to do your job and do it really well without kind of constraints. But I think that's the hard part. And just remembering that we're all people as well. Just sometimes people forget.
Yeah, well done remaining diplomatic there. That was very impressive. And so moving on to your experience of like getting people's voices heard and involved in your school, what was your kind of experience of that before you kind of took on the role?
Yeah, I mean, our head teacher, Rachel Swinbank, she's amazing, and she was deputy head at the time when she got involved with Smart School Council. I was coming from another setting where it was kind of the old-fashioned view of the school council, and I say old-fashioned just because I feel like sometimes people do things over and over again and don't really think to change it just because it's the way they've always done it. So my experience of the school council was, upper Key Stage 2 kids, and you have an agenda from the teachers basically, and you can make change in the realms that the teachers deem, the head, the leadership team. And I think Rachel Swinbank had also had experience of that in her past roles, that, the school council possibly wasn't really serving the school in the way that she would have wanted it to. So I think she obviously got involved with you guys, and she started the whole ball rolling. And I just remember coming here as a teacher and being like, whoa, like the nursery and reception kids are involved, which was amazing to me. The class meetings and all of the different ways that the children can get involved. And it's actually a whole school approach. It's not just, your kind of good as gold select few in maybe year 6 and year 5. So that really appealed to us because we want to make change for the children, not for us. And I think that's been the driving force, really.
Amazing. No, that's great. Thanks, Rachel. And kind of when did you first get involved, and kind of what were you up to? What happened, I guess?
Yeah, so Rachel, as I say, was the kind of made the first contact with you. I don't know how it happened, but she'd heard about Smart School Council and obviously just really loved what she saw. And when I think it was kind of just before lockdown, so it's probably about 5+ years, and just ran with it. And I think it just gave us something to focus on. As I say, Rachel was kind of the lead for the first year or two, and then because my role became character development, it just seemed really a natural kind of handover for me to kind of cover it. We are a rights respecting school as well. And I think all of these things just come hand in hand, when you look at some of the articles. And one of the things that we need the children to understand is that they do have a voice and that they should have a voice. And it's not just kind of hot air. We're actually committed So the way I got involved was just kind of embedding it, I suppose. So making sure that all the staff were on board, making sure that everybody actually just knew what they were supposed to do. I think we'll probably talk later about how simple it is, but I think sometimes people feel a little bit daunted, like they think, oh goodness, we've got all this, as if you're going to reinvent the wheel, but actually you're just using things that you've already got at your disposal. The biggest thing I think is time. So we just made sure we carved out a time to do our class meetings, a time to have communication team meet. And obviously I oversee that, but it's the staff who make that happen. So we started quite slow, and then now it's just like second nature.
Yeah, I really like when schools that we work with start slow and just try and understand it and embed it properly, because I think that typically means that you're going to embed something properly, doesn't it? What? So what did you do? What did you when you sort of took it over?
So I started off by just really looking at the communication team and thinking carefully about who's on the community. So for anyone who doesn't know, your communication team is effectively your representatives from each of the classes, really. And even in its infancy with our school, it had predominantly been Key Stage 2 children. So I kind of came in and said, no, I'd like that to go right from early years. The way that we work now is we have early years ambassadors, just because I do an after school club with the children. Every Thursday we'll have like our communication team meeting. So we have 2 children from every year group from year 1 up. And then we have early years ambassadors from Key Stage 2 who work with early years. So they'll kind of go and talk to the children and work with the children so that they can still have their voice heard at the communication team meetings. We had already done weekly class meetings, but when I kind of got involved, we just wanted to change the focus a little bit again and just bring it completely back to the children. Looking at the questions that we use, looking at the impact, have we got all of the different elements that the children wanted to see, rather than it being something that an adult wanted. And that's really very different. And just working through it, like you said, kind of embedding it really securely before trying to move forward. So for example, back then it was literally just class meetings, getting the communication team up and running, and that's kind of now it's moved into something a bit more. So now it's like a huge part of our pupil voice as a school, a huge part of our rights, respect and skills work. And the kids do assemblies. We've worked with Picture News and done some training with them with the communication team, which has been really good. Even things like our play squad. So it just affects every aspect of school life, really. It all comes from Smart School Council in terms of the things that the children want and need.
Amazing. Well, I've got so many questions to follow up, Rachel. It's really, really helpful. It's really interesting to me hearing you talk about it. What was it that you changed with the focus of the class meetings? What was it that, because a lot of schools start with maybe some more of the debate questions, or they pick some of ours, and then they begin to select some of their own ones as well. What did you do?
So I always found it really good to browse I think there's an option there where you usually give about 5 or 6 examples of questions, and I absolutely love that. Even now we still use that. Because, for example, if it's, say, I don't know, National Poetry Week, and you've got a question linking to that, it can be really helpful just to give you a little bit of guidance of, where to go. Sometimes, I would think of the questions myself, and I would kind of think, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? Actually, when the kids are doing it. So now our communication team, that's part of their Thursday night meeting, that they review kind of what's been said. We discuss actions, and then we look at next week's question. So now, because we're more familiar with it, we can be a little bit more specific with what we want to gain from it. In the beginning, it was sometimes like, what kind of superhero would you be? Or what would your special power be? Now, those questions actually give you everything you need in terms of debating skills. Children are passionate about it. They want to have their voice heard. They listen to other people's opinions, and then that kind of sends them off another tangent. So those questions are just as important as the kind of more serious questions. We've had questions on there about politics, about, you know, things that we can make real change with. So, for example, we decided we were going to have an all-girls football day in the ball court just because some of the girls that came to communication team and said, we feel like we're being pushed out a little bit by the boys. We don't often get to play football and we'd really like to. So we did it in a class meeting and really debated it, unpicked what was going on. And then obviously that was something myself, the deputy, the PE lead as well, we sat down and said, look, what can we do? How can we make this better? And it's just snowballed. Like just this morning, I had one of our lovely teaching assistants who referees the games sometimes came in and said, I think we need to ask the children again. We need it narrowed down a bit. Do we want to have girls only certain year groups, or do we want to have? So I've got members of staff coming to me to say, we need to ask the children this. So those question prompts are great to get started. And then when you know what direction you need to take on certain things, you can use them to get a true representation of what the children want.
Yeah, it's that balance of kind of being able to give schools something easy to get started, but then when you're ready to go a bit beyond that. And Rachel, talk me through the kind of cycle that you've got. So you've got a Thursday night communication team meeting. What happens every week or every 2 weeks? What does that look like?
So basically, our class meeting day for the whole school's a Thursday, but I do send out the question just on a Monday night. We carve out some time on a Thursday morning. So we have assembly every day, but our Thursday assembly is our class assembly, which is our class meeting. And that's in every year group. Obviously, the way that timetables are, I like to make sure that the staff have the question to start the week on, Monday morning. They get an email. This is the question of the week, just a little gist of what it involves. And then it just means that they can kind of think, right, well, maybe they want to do it as part of their PSE, or, if they're learning about debating or politics, depending on when it is. But it just means that the leadership team have given and said that half an hour there is everybody has to do it, And, there's the odd time when sometimes some classes will have to miss it, field trip or whatever. But generally, 95% of the school partake. Once we've got all the results in, sometimes we'll be missing a couple of classes. It doesn't really matter. Our communication team meetings, generally, we have a bit of a chat and just catch up, because obviously the kids are from like age 5 up to 11. So, and what's really interesting is obviously we have different communication team leads every year. And I would say that the younger children now are so vocal. They're just as vocal as the older children. And it's just like sitting in a room with adults, have a bit chat. We don't really put hands up. We don't do any of that. I'm just there to facilitate. So they very much need it. So someone takes notes and minutes on the big whiteboard, and then they get on my chair and they're off to look at the results from the class meeting question and say, well, what can we do with that? Do we need to speak to somebody about that? We look at the following week's question, and sometimes they've just brought something with them. They're like, we've recently got pens for school, and last 2 weeks ago, one of the little girls from year 4 came in and she was like, Mrs. Gray, I really, really need to sort this out. There are left-handed people and they're smudging their work because of these new pens. And she was like really passionate. And then that obviously opened a can of worms in terms of other people saying, oh, well, we have someone who had blue pen on his hand all day and all this stuff. So have the little debates, can be different things every week. And then obviously we come to a question. So as an example, that week, they wanted to ask, do we need to order some left-handed pens? And obviously that question went out to the whole school. We also, every month, we kind of hijack communication team and look at it from a rights respecting angle. So it's like 2 birds with 1 stone, because actually those children who understand the importance of their voice being heard, who are able to kind of articulate how other people are feeling, they are our rights respecting ambassadors. They're the people who are going to be able to say, are those people accessing their rights? Do we need to do something to make sure that their rights are available? So it all comes hand in hand. We only have like 45-minute session. It's not a long time. And then we do have a party as well now and again. So have a
Nothing wrong
little,
with a party, Rachel.
yeah, little celebration, we'll get our jobs done, and then, we might have a little popcorn party, just something as a thank you to those children for giving up their time and for doing a really great job. But generally we talk about, the things that are going on that week, and then we look forward.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. It's really good to see that it's so embedded in the routine of the school there, isn't it? And that's amazing for me as somebody who works for Sparks Councils to hear about the kind of how central it is to the running of the school. I, I was wondering about two things. Firstly, from your perspective as an early years expert or someone who works in early years, how does it work? How do the class meetings work with the very, very little children? Because, somebody who's not in education might think, well, how are you getting these 5 or 6-year-olds involved in democracy? Surely that's impossible. How does that work from your perspective?
I think the thing to remember is that they're doing it all day, every day anyway. You're just not labelling it. So as an example, something that often happens in early years is they might have 2 parts and 2 books, like stories. And then the children throughout the course of the day will have their cubes. And then through that morning, they get to put a cube in which story they'd like to choose. That's democracy, And actually, the simple things like having quite a physical acting. So sometimes the way that it works is they have key worker groups. So the children are in little groups of 15. We've got 60 reception children. And in the past, when I was in early years, it was kind of a case of our morning routine was that on a Thursday, again, we'd do the class meeting question, but it wouldn't be like in front of a computer. So we would just have the question on the little whiteboard with the options, just really kind of very visual. And the children would you'd start off by just talking to your partner and then a stand up and a sit down to vote. So that might be kind of your first, for the autumn term, that might be all you do, so you can select how many groups you've got. Then you would just pop in the results as you would, but obviously you're really kind of guiding that and leading it. By kind of the spring term, that's when you can start to introduce a little bit more, kind of having more of them within the same meeting and looking at that debate, the technique and being able to listen and, respond. And then, I remember in the summer term, I think when you visited us, I can't remember if we went down to early years, but I can remember sitting in an early years lesson, like a class meeting, and just thinking these kids are unreal, because they would literally, like the note taker would then be at the point where they have their little whiteboard, walk around and be like, what did you come up with? And they would have nominated a spokesperson for their group. And they've not, if they've had a disagreement, they would often say, we're going for other option, we want to add our, and things like that. It's not just a simple yes or a no. They're actually really thinking about the question. And again, I think that comes from staff, just letting the staff, trusting your staff to do it the way that they need to do it for those children.
Yeah, that's amazing. And there's a good catchphrase in there, Rachel. You said, that's democracy.
Yeah.
I think we're definitely going to keep that one. That's amazing. And you're right, isn't it? Because it's, you do play that role in early years, probably quite a lot of time.
Yeah.
It's just whether you make it explicit and then you're planting a seed, I guess, for later on as they go up through the school. What about staff? So, if you think about, again, you sort of think about from an outsider's perspective or like a new school, they're like, oh, we're going to get everybody involved. Well, that sounds really a lot of work, and there's going to be meetings in every class. Like, how do you think about it? How did you explain it to your staff to make sure that they weren't worried about it?
I think the thing is, it seems, when you say it like you've just kind of framed it there, it seems complicated, but actually it's not. It's no different really than kind of just clicking on a video or a presentation or a PowerPoint, for example, but it's just you literally click on the link. So the first thing I suppose is that you do need someone who's leading it to just understand the ins and outs a little bit. So just knowing how to set up the class meeting. It's not difficult. Once you've done it, all I would say is just give it a whirl, like have a look about the kind of the interface, the website, the where you log in and things, and just kind of have a little play with it first, because there's things that I was uncovering 2 years in that I was like, oh, look at this facility, you can do that. Or you can, obviously the emails that you get sent with the little kind of tips and things. So I would say have someone who's willing to have a little look around, but then when you're introducing it to staff, it doesn't have to be a big, huge thing. And I think the best way is to do a class meeting with your staff so that they can actually see how easy it is and how, the children just take over. They just do it for you. And they're really good as well, even things for behaviour. And, when you think, how will these two, the class leader and the note taker, how are they going to manage? But actually, they can manage behaviour. They can say to each other, are you listening to one another? They can ding that bell and say, right, it's got a little bit out of hand. We're going to bring it back in. And I'm in nursery. I'm kind of sat bang in the middle of the school. I don't need to do anything. So all I would say to people is don't worry about it. Just go, give it a go. Give it a go, because when you explain it to your staff, like we've got our teaching assistants involved as well, because obviously there's often times that they might be covering a class, So now I just email, I think that email on a Monday morning, just so that they know where to access it, and just giving a little overview of what the meeting's about. Because if you are talking about maybe something that you might want to prepare yourself for, when we're looking at things like LGBTQ plus, if you're working in early years, you need to rehearse something in your head as to, I need to do this justice and make sure that I explain it to the children. So just reading the question out and not really thinking about what's behind it, that's important as well. You need to know a little bit of background for some things. But again, I'm very open as lead, and I'll just say, if you've got any questions about the question or you wonder how to approach it, because sometimes we do talk about really kind of quite complex topics. But yeah, just don't be scared and give it a go and explain it to your staff as simply as you can, because it is very simple when you do it.
Yeah, that's a really good reminder. Thanks, Rachel. Because it's and it might feel a bit weird the first few times that the staff do it, because they're handing over to two pupils to run it for them, and hopefully then sitting back. And I know some teachers and teaching assistants struggle with that sometimes, because it's not always the position that they might have found themselves in the classroom, of course. And what couple more questions before we finish up. What is the, when you think of maybe one of those more controversial or topics that, or I guess topics that have had a lot of discussion, what comes to mind?
I mean, I think when the riots and things were going on, not the more recent riots, but I suppose things like Black Lives Matter and really unpicking, sometimes looking at disasters that have happened, like natural disasters, these are huge, heavy topics. And as adults, we struggle sometimes to understand, articulate how we feel about it, and actually just giving the children that space, because sadly, they will have seen it, whether it be on the news, they'll have heard things discussed, and sometimes it's very much out of context. So one of the debates I think that probably does stand out is when we focus on specific days, we'd actually ask the question, it's Black History Month. Do you think there should be a Black History Month? Because shouldn't we learn about everybody's history, regardless of race, religion, all of that, all of the time? And that was a really interesting debate. Things about heritage as well, kind of thing. Like, you learn so much about your children that actually you would have never known without that question. So yeah, big topics like, there were riots near where we live, and I'm from Sunderland. And we used picture news alongside our class meeting. So there was pictures of your local area. So we had a kind of an assembly on the Monday from Pick News, and then by the Thursday, the children were ready to talk about it, and they could debate really well, and they could kind of say things that had bothered them about it, or what should and shouldn't have happened. So those huge topics, and they're going home, my 7-year-old class saying to their parents how they feel about the riot. It's huge. And actually, that's the change. That's the kind of just the first step to talking about it.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're doing a great job in terms of, I see, not ignoring those subjects, but bringing them into the classroom in the school in a kind of safe and structured and thoughtful way, because the young people are going to be much stronger debaters and more confident communicators with having those discussions. And it's great if they're having them taking them home as well to discuss with the family. How does this link with your character development work? Because obviously you're doing so much with that, it sounds like.
I mean, I think when I think about my role in terms of it, it's almost like we often kind of look at our rights respecting work as a huge umbrella in terms of, children's rights, and Smart School Council goes hand in hand with that, because obviously the biggest things for our children, they need to know their rights, but they also need to understand that they can make change, that they can have a voice, that there's real action that's taken. So my role as character development lead, it's sort of looking at like cultural capital, it's looking at the curriculum with our lovely deputy head, Michelle. She's amazing, and she's just so open, and it's always saying, kind of looking at the world as like a window. So, you're looking out at what's going on, but also that people can look in at you as well. And being able to see things from different perspectives. I suppose it's all the things that will make you a successful citizen in the world. And I think it's remembering. So my role is really reminding people that the children are citizens now, and that what they think now matters, and the change they make now. It's not all about, making them ready for the world. Actually, they're living in the world now. So, yeah, it is a big role, but I think we've got such an amazing staff who they take things on board, and they actually, you've got to have your staff on board, because my job wouldn't exist without them doing it day to day, my kind of role of overseeing that. And just kind of at the moment, we're just really trying to have a little bit of direction and focus, and thinking, what are we going to achieve next? So something that's on the horizon for us at the moment is our Gold Award for Rights, Respect in Schools.
Amazing.
Now, with that, it's a huge part about kind of thinking about the difference between equity and equality, and making sure that everybody has what they need, not that they're just given an equal kind of thing, but that they've got what they need. And actually, our Smart School Council, that's what we're about, getting everybody to get what they need. That's what we're trying to do. And also thinking about, again, just the children as human beings, making sure that, we do everything with dignity and respect, and in giving them a voice and in allowing them space to be heard, that's what we've got to keep doing.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's another catchphrase there, Rachel. They are citizens now. There's a couple that we've included in this podcast. So honestly, thank you so much for coming along. It's brilliant to hear about how positive and inclusive and embedded young people's voices are at Kells Lane Primary School. And honestly, I really got that sense when I visited the school. I think it was last year or the year before. I can't remember. But thank you so much for sharing and coming along. We really appreciate it. And thanks very much, Rachel.
It's my pleasure. And obviously, thank you for all the support, because it's just, the best idea ever. So thank you for coming up with it. And, we're really lucky that we get to be part of it as a school. So thank you.
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so much to Rachel for being here and sharing with us her approach to helping everybody in their school to speak up. If you want to find out more about Smart School Councils and how we can help schools to get every voice involved in a simple way, then drop us an email. You can find us at smartschoolcouncils.org.uk. As I said, we're working with about 600 schools across the world, and this is a sort of a model that you can use from anywhere. So we would love to hear from you. Thanks again to Rachel, and thanks again for checking out our very first episode of All Chalk. We'll see you next time.